Am I the only one bothered that the yield on first-line properties is up to 5% per year? In this video, we're going to discuss this very issue and all the risks associated with the first line, buying real estate on the first line, since it's a highly popular choice. A huge number of people who come here try to buy on the first line thinking it's super profitable, that it's a great investment and other such things. So the goal of this video is to break down all these nuances and give you a complete picture of the situation. On this matter, I have a free private group for you, which you can join via the link in Telegram. Under this video, there's a lot of free information on new developments for you. These are my honest, open opinions about various new developments, where it's profitable to invest and what the risks are. Also, of course, there will be prices for where projects you can enter at very great prices, which again, you won't find in the public domain. In short, there's a whole goldmine of knowledge for you. So be sure to follow the link under this video. You'll be satisfied. Let's start with the first problem of the first line. It's, of course, the rental prices. They are quite low. And someone might say that's not bad, but usually people who don't run the numbers say that. The thing is, if you run the numbers, you'll realize that relative to the cost of real estate you can buy on the first line now, it's up to 5% per year, practically everywhere. Except perhaps if you handle the rentals yourself, spend your time, you might add another couple of percent per year. But again, those are the percentages that will be at the expense of your time. And there are several reasons why rental prices on the first line are low. First is the fairly large supply on the first line, yes, meaning the market is full of different options. Second is the low quality. Practically all complexes on the first line don't represent strong concepts, so a solvent audience doesn't go there, but an audience that wants to be by the sea and basically get the lowest price for it. That is, they have such a goal, and in essence, these complexes satisfy this goal. But what's the problem? The problem is that if you invest money there, you earn critically little. The second problem is undoubtedly the prices. Many projects starting now, if we take business and premium, they start above $3,000 per square meter. Moreover, many of these projects are fairly large anthills, which are easy to enter but very hard to crawl out of, because like in an anthill, there are many passages and it's unclear where the exit is. A price of $3,000 per square is good only if you understand that the developer will build what was promised and you can come out of it all with a profit. That's great, but of course it's not always like that. And most developers don't have a margin for risk. What margin for risk am I talking about? For example, you take a new development costing $3,000 per square. By the way, this same topic applies to new builds costing $1,200 or say $1,000 per square. Doesn't matter. The issue here is quality, the concept. So if you have, for example, a developer charging $3,000 per square and promising you that you'll resell it later for $4,000 or $5,000 per square, you have to understand what the price of this project will be if the developer doesn't keep their promises or does a poor low-quality job and so on. So the risk margin in this case could be, for example, $2,000 per square meter. So considering the risks, right? For instance, the developer lacks construction expertise, right? Their deadlines might slip, for the project's construction because they've, basically delayed a lot of things already. And they might have many people exiting the project because reassignments are prohibited. In short, there can be many different risks upon completion, right? And you need a price that accounts for a margin, so that if these risks materialize, you could at least break even. Well, most prices for today's new builds don't have this risk margin. So you're already entering at the price where the developer has to do everything perfectly, exactly as they say. Just like in the pictures, just as they say, everything down to the last detail. If they don't do it that way, then it's like unfortunate. And that's also a problem with construction now, on the front line. There are plenty of them in Kobuleti now. In Kobuleti, there are now many developers currently building, and that problem is very much present there. The next problem is the inability to live in the projects. What's the story behind this? You buy another piece of real estate, including on the front line, and your own year-round residency is prohibited, right? What does that mean? It means not only can't you live there, you can't even rent it out yourself. The main problem here is that you're completely trusting the management company to deliver good returns in the future. But if this management company delivers poor returns, then you're caught in a trap. Why? Because reselling this property will be extremely difficult at the price you paid, because whoever comes after you will see that the yield is poor, that it's non-existent. And unfortunately, today the market is full of such developers, such companies that build projects and then yield terrible returns. 1% annually too. There are many cases where people invest in projects where they even have to pay extra, right? Meaning the management company operates their property and they still pay for maintenance, because they get absolutely nothing for the year. And that's actually a big problem too. So new projects appearing now, including on the front line, aren't free of this problem. It's present there too. What does the security of your own residency and your own rental give you? Well, roughly speaking, if the developer sets up a poor management company somewhere, firstly, they'll have the motivation to create a good management company because they understand that a person can either rent it out themselves or through their management company. So he understands that if his management company performs poorly, people simply won't work with them. Right, so if the developer forbids this, meaning they restrict you to renting only through them and no other way, you can assume with a high degree of certainty that this management company will do a terrible job. Why? Because there is no competition. It is just that simple, because there is no competition. And there are many such projects, including many new ones. In fact, I would say there are few projects with the opposite concept. There are critically few of them. Next is my favorite, which is, of course, city within a city projects. I will not point any fingers, of course. Well, again, I will not do it here. You can head over to my Telegram channel. We can talk a bit more candidly there. What is the main point? They build a huge project with great infrastructure that you can use if you are the owner, but your tenant cannot use it if you rent it out yourself. So they are basically forcing you to hand everything over to the management company. And you might ask, what is so bad about that? I will let the management company handle it, sit back and collect my returns, but not so fast. The problem is, once you hand it over, those returns just will not be there. And when you realize there is no profit, you decide to rent it out yourself. So you start renting it out on your own, but then that same infrastructure becomes paid for you. Meaning you cannot provide it to your tenant for free. Consequently, you are not renting out the full value, but only a part of it. Essentially, you are just renting out square meters by the sea. And that is a huge problem because square meters by the sea are very cheap. You can check any booking site to see the rental price for just a square meter by the sea. Super cheap. Even in high season, it can easily be $30 or $40, no problem at all. So the real value lies in having some form of entertainment. And the better that entertainment is, well planned, vibrant, with great service and attention to detail, the higher your returns, because people will come back for that great infrastructure, that excellent service, and so on. And by the way, there are very few projects with free infrastructure that you can offer your tenants. I talk about such projects on my Telegram channel as well, so subscribe, it will be interesting. Now let's talk about the quality of infrastructure in these projects. This is also crucial so that the people who come to you are willing to pay a premium for it, for the infrastructure, for your room, for the whole package. So imagine you have found a project with what I am talking about, free infrastructure, it is good. And in that light, we can look for these projects on the first line. But in Batumi, there is not a single project with complete infrastructure. Yeah, basically there are almost no projects with infrastructure. In Gonyo today, there are only projects under construction that offer more or less decent infrastructure, but then again, they haven't been built yet. And there again are issues with restrictions, right? You can't provide this infrastructure to subtenants yourself. There are problems there too. In Kobuleti, most projects under construction work the same way, yeah. The infrastructure is sort of there. When you buy into a project, right, you're paying for it. They tell you, look at our great project with such massive infrastructure. And a person thinks, yeah, I'm not just buying a square meter, I'm buying a project with infrastructure. But if you think about it, if you read the contract, then the service terms and so on, you'll realize you can't even use that very infrastructure. Though, to be honest, it's far from great from those who claim that it's great, so please keep this point in mind as well. And the next important point is the ban on assignments. Of course, when you enter, and now, most projects from those claiming they'll build business and premium class aren't free from this problem either. They have what are called resale bans, which basically means that you are not allowed to resell your unit while your building is still under construction. The problem here is obvious, right? When construction ends, you have a huge number of people wanting to sell who've waited 5 to 7 years. And you naturally end up in a queue. Of those who want to sell, when you have so many offers, your price collapses. This is, well, it's obvious, it's the law of the market. I think no one will argue with that. And so you, for example, waited 5 to 7 years and will wait another 3 years until this volume of real estate is sold off and the price stabilizes, even if only a bit. Investors remain in a somewhat uncertain position. So banned assignments are definitely a disaster for an investor. But what do local developers do? A genius scheme. They allow assignments for some. Yeah, and then you can, so say in a complex of, I don't know, 500 apartments, and for some 20 people who badgered them for permission for these assignments, they actually allowed it. And you can see assignments at $2,500 while your project bought at $4,000 per square meter is being built. Yeah, how do you like that variety, that abundance? And I'm not telling you fairy tales here. There are specific projects. If you write to me, I can show you and tell you. And these aren't small developers. It's not some, project somewhere far, far away. These are actually major projects from major developers. This problem exists. And you also have to understand that the price must be one for which a client is willing to pay more on the secondary market. So if you buy for 3, you must be sure that tomorrow for 4, this product should sell on the secondary market, because in all other cases, you'll just lose money. Now let's talk about one more very important point. It's the audience. Who wants the first line? Actually, most wealthy people, truly wealthy ones, who travel to various countries around the world and can afford to rent real estate for $300 or $400 per square meter, they don't always want to be by the sea. In fact, more often than not, they don't want to be near the sea. Why? Because these people have plenty of seaside properties in different countries already. So basically, they don't have that specific need. Who actually wants to, own property near the sea? It's usually those people who have rarely even seen the sea themselves, right? Of course, there are always exceptions, certainly, but most often, if we look at the general population, those who aim to live right by the sea are usually people who are not very well off financially. This tends to be the case in many places. In other words, it's a low-income audience. And an investor needs to understand this too, that their target audience for a seaside complex, especially if the product is weak, will be exactly that and nothing else. So if you bought a first-line complex with a weak concept and poor infrastructure, or no infrastructure at all, you can just forget about a high-paying audience. They will never be in that complex. And this is the main mistake people make when they want to be close to the sea. They think, I'll have a seaside complex and it'll be fully booked. Maybe it will be full during the season. The question is, at what price? Would it suit you if your complex is filled at a price of $40, where $20 or $10 at least, or even $15 goes to cleaning, marketing, and everything else, leaving you with pennies in the end? Does that work for you? I don't think so. That's why the issue of first-line seaside real estate is only relevant when there's a strong concept behind it. And here's the opposite story. Many people, and you can see this on Booking again, there are a number of projects located far up in the mountains, situated 50 kilometers from Batumi and so on. You can see one example of such a project here. As I mentioned, it's 50 kilometers from Batumi, and around it, there aren't even any shops, right? So there's basically no infrastructure at all. And it rents for $150 a night in season, $300 off season, and it's fully booked. Why? Because it has a great concept, a small number of rooms, and everything is very, very well thought out. And we have, of course, arrived at the next problem, which is a small number of rooms. Now, if you pay attention, almost every construction project in Batumi right now is a high-rise with 1,000 apartments. Even those crazy projects promising a city within a city are building the same kind of anthills. What's the point of an anthill? The point of an anthill is that it's very profitable for the developer. The developer pays a certain amount for the land and gets the maximum margin and profit from it due to the large number of rooms. While the infrastructure provided is often very mediocre and weak, with spending on it being like, usually it's about a little money and it's done just to check a box, to get the maximum profit, the maximum margin. What does such a large number of rooms mean for you? It's a very simple story. There will be many people like you who bought this miracle, both for resale and for rent. You'll be competing with each other with a huge number of people just like you, people who bought this property. And if you look at how smart people do it, how brands do it, they create a small number of rooms. You won't find a single branded hotel where you'll see 40 floors or 50 floors of rooms, not one. Here's an example of the project I told you about, Paragraph. It has a small number of rooms. Well, there's some, even in the picture, I'll try to find it and attach it for you now. You can see what the Paragraph project itself looks like. That's the one that rents for $150 to $300 a night. And you can see what the developer is building nearby. I mean, there are, I don't know, but visually at least 5 times more rooms. At least 5 times. Accordingly, we ask ourselves a question. An international hotel brand that owns dozens, thousands of hotels all over the world. Yes, it's not just the Paragraph brand. I think it's the Marriott Group. Paragraph is part of the Marriott Group, if I remember correctly. Now, are these guys really so stupid that they build a small number of rooms for themselves? Just think about it. I mean, they're a major brand that knows the statistics, the prices, customer movement across different countries with thousands of hotels and so on. They come and build a small number of rooms. Well, you'd think, are they fools or something? Why not build 3 times more and earn 3 times more? It doesn't work like that. These guys understand how many rooms they can actually fill. And this is a key feature. Why? Because if they build a building 3 times larger than they did, but only fill it a third as much, their construction costs go up. Right? So they fill 3 times less, but the construction cost is 3 times more. And their return on invested capital drops. Right? So they understand that if they build more rooms than needed, their return on invested capital will be quite low. That's why they build the optimal number of rooms that they can fill seasonally, about 60% throughout the year. And everything's great, right? They know then that in the peak season they have almost 100% occupancy, like 95 in the low season. It's around 50%, and the annual average is 60 to 70%. Perfect. If they had built twice as many, their profitability would have dropped significantly, you see? You might ask, well, why is that? The developers who build for you don't consider this factor. Why do they build you thousands of apartments instead of 100? I mean, they could have built the same kind of small, cozy complex with great infrastructure and 100 apartments. It's all wonderful. It would be rented out. It would be filled. The answer, guys, is very simple, very simple. When they sell to you, they've already made their profit at the moment of the sale, period. So the moment they sold you this complex, this product, the profit is already in their pocket. After that, issues of earnings, product quality, and so on, those are your problems now. They're no longer their concern. Take my word for it. Yeah, if you read the vast majority of contracts, practically all the developers building here, they don't give a damn about your profit. Absolutely. That's why they build a huge number of units. They push crappy infrastructure on you. They paint the most beautiful pictures for you. All of this is only necessary so that they can get that money from you, the money they want to get from you. And in fact, when they finish building, you can't find fault with anything because they delivered your square meters. They delivered more or less the finish that they roughly promised you. They usually either don't deliver the infrastructure at all or they deliver it just for show. Yeah, why? Because again, it's not specified in the contract. And if it is, it's just written in the text. So you're like, is there a pool? There's a pool. Is it impossible to swim? Impossible. But it's there, right? It's there. And that's it. And like, so what? What are you going to say? You won't say anything. So it's very important to understand this point. Yeah, what you're buying, you have to understand what you're buying into to figure it out. I invite you to the Telegram channel. There'll be lots of interesting stuff like what I'm telling you now, and even more, yeah. That is, you will have a complete set of knowledge about real estate, so you can invest your money well and not lose it later. The next important issue is long construction times. They essentially stem from the previous point I told you about, that once the developer has received the maximum, well, basically received your money, they don't need to rush to build anymore. Because you're paying in installments, you won't back out of it. Because if you do, you'll lose out. Yeah, you'll give them 20% back. They understand that even if I delay construction by 2 or 3 years, nothing will happen to me. And you'll ask me, boy, but what about the penalties in the contract, blah, blah, blah. Well, the trick is that most people, when it comes to collecting those very penalties from the developer, they realize they don't want to go to court. And the developer knows this too, that most of the clients in their complex won't sue them. If 1, 2, or 3 clients do sue them, well, so be it. They'll eventually pay them that penalty and that's it. But they won't pay the majority. So they understand that I can delay for 2 or even 3 years, and for me, using other people's money will cost next to nothing. Do you understand? That's the main point. And that's why most developers don't even have the motivation to build on time for you. Because why bother? Will the building be built eventually? It will. So what if they're building it for 7 or 8 years? Well, so be it. What difference does it make to them? That you're waiting there, that your profitability is dropping critically. So if your building takes 2 to 3 years to build, that's 1 yield. If it takes 5 to 7 years, there's no yield at all, right? So that's basically how it goes. The next problem is the lack of completed projects from those promising you beautiful pictures. The thing is, many developers, especially in the segment selling for say $1,000 to $2,000 per square meter without finishing, right? So with finishing, well, roughly figure about $2,000 per square meter with finishing. Most developers don't have any proven track record of what they're promising you. I mean, they promise you a pretty picture. They promise a super infrastructure. Everything will be there, restaurants, everything will be perfect. You look at what they've built before, and most either have nothing or it's just budget-friendly housing. Right, and then we face the question, will those who made a Zhiguli build me a Mercedes? Of course they won't, it's obvious. And then if we look further into it, we realize they never had the intention to build in the first place. Their intention was just to paint a picture and make it look nice so you'd easily hand over your money. That's it. So this point must also be taken into account, and a huge number of people make mistakes here. Mistakes are made in expensive projects too. There are developers selling for $3,500, $4,000, and they have no completed projects. They don't have anything they've built for people, specifically for people. That's also key. There are developers where you can see what they built for people and what they built for themselves. For themselves, they built great complexes because they invested their own cash and earn it back in rent. But for you, they build a hideous, moldy structure and call it premium class. Well, that's kind of how the market works. The next problem, I've already mentioned it a bit, is that resale is cheaper than new builds. In almost most complexes you look at on the first line, first, second, third, well, near the first line, those under construction are cheaper than the resale market. What does that mean? You buy a new build, but you'll be selling it at the resale price, right? Despite the fairy tales and figures the developer shows you, you'll sell what you bought at the resale market price without exception. Absolutely without any exceptions. But sometimes it seems that when I buy, well, this wonderful, beautiful picture, a wonderful promise, I'll sell it close to the developer's price. You won't. You'll be selling at the resale market price. It's just an axiom, guys. So you can look at different projects and compare them. If you can't do it yourself, write to me. I'll help you look and compare. Right, you'll see that most projects under construction are more expensive than the resale market. By buying them, you're already in the red at the purchase stage. Returning to the issue of the large number of units, I want to say to some developers, what on earth are you doing? Right, especially in Coboleti, where there are these old spruce and coniferous forests. They're building 40 to 50 floors there. So they're building this kind of infrastructure, well, not infrastructure, but a building that just doesn't fit into the nature of this place at all. And now you can see this very often in Coboleti, yeah. I mean, it's a beautiful, truly beautiful place. But they've built just whatever there. And so when you go to a developer and in a beautiful spot where there should be a low-rise building, something cozy and cool with great infrastructure where everything should just blend with the location and so on, you see 50 floors, you can immediately grasp the developer's mindset. Well, I always say that you don't have to look very far to understand a project. Just by looking at basic, simple things, you can see the developer's way of thinking. What was going through the developer's head when they built 50 floors in such a beautiful, great spot? In my opinion, it's obviously the cash. Well, there can't be anything else there, right? Because instead of building a project that fits into nature, into the location, and does all that organically, he just builds these 50-story pencil towers. Well, the answer there, in my view, is obvious, yeah. And all the other decisions of such a developer will be the same, believe me. And of course, when you see huge anthills in such locations, just these crazy anthills in a great cool little spot like that, you should always wonder how you're going to get out of it. Yeah, especially after seeing the same number of projects there, or you might say, well, I can always resell it. I'll agree with you, you will resell it. The only question is at what price? I mean, yes, you'll resell it, no question about that, but at what price? Why? Because a huge number of people in Batumi, it's a market for people from abroad, right? So local people don't buy this real estate in such volumes here. It's an external market, so all these new buildings are designed for the foreign market. And what's the main point? When an investor comes in and puts their money down, they see a pretty picture, they think it'll all rent out perfectly, but that same investor doesn't think about who's going to buy it later. You see? Because the biggest, most main flow of people goes specifically for new construction. Because people have this stereotype, it's new, I put my money in, so it's good and wonderful, but later, so that you can get that money out, take it back from there, you need someone who buys on the secondary market. And that's a completely different story altogether. It's an entirely different game and a different number of people and so on and so forth. And you always have to ask yourself, who are you going to sell these volumes of real estate to? Those people who think about the questions I've listed for you in this video, their chances of getting into a crappy project, buying something super illiquid or falling for some unrealistic promises is extremely low, right? Because they think about these things, meaning they include this list of questions in their filter. I highly recommend including this list of questions in your filter, because if you look through this prism from this point of view, it'll become much clearer, much easier and more peaceful for you to buy real estate. Of course, I can't possibly talk to you here about all the issues, about absolutely all the issues and topics that exist or might come up. Yeah, because I'm in a public space right now and there are certain limitations to what I can discuss openly in this setting. But if anyone, and I really mean anyone, wants to write to me personally, please feel free to do so. We can definitely go much deeper and have a more in-depth conversation where we can talk in much more detail about different projects, various solutions, your potential returns, and so many other things that could be useful and interesting for you. So please don't hesitate to write to me. I'll be genuinely glad to get to know you, have a chat, and hopefully see you soon.